Holy shit, John said. I'm going to go back to my car and get some gloves. I'll bring some for everybody, I said as I walked away from the crime scene. I started walking across the field again. I was dragging my feet as I walked to try and get some of the hay off my shoes. It was odd. I felt as if I was being watched as I walked through the field. I looked left and right along the tree line, but I didn't see anybody. I turned around and still I did not see a single person besides the officer who took the horses out of the barn. He was crouched, picking up grass, attempting to feed the horses. I turned back and walked towards the car. From the field, you walk along a fence that was along the side yard of the house. The house has 2 windows on that side. Now, I could have been seeing things, but I swear I saw a curtain move and someone's hand go behind it. I decided to go back inside the house. I figured it was just the other officers who were called. I walked up the front steps and into the door. As I entered, I got lightheaded and dizzy. Everything I saw flashed and went from blue to green and back to blue. It happens though. I think I remember reading somewhere that it's from adrenaline kicking in really fast. I made my way towards the room I saw on the side of the house with the moving curtain. I've only been in this house for a handful of times, usually just Christmas or other major family events. I knew Anna from high school, so her family and I were very close. I found the room that I had seen the hand in and walked in. It just had a bunch of boxes in it, like a storage room. I went to the window and moved the curtains. The curtains were dusty as if they hadn't been moved in a long time. The air started getting heavy. It was almost suffocating at that point. I didn't see anybody in that room or the room next to it, which had the second window on the side of the house. I started to go to my car and I ran into one of the officers who were in charge of the crime scene in the house. We're almost done here. We've got one body and, well, one head, correct? I mean, you were the first officer to enter the house, right? He asked. One body? No. There are 2 bodies, and there wasn't just a head. It was a whole body, and a body split in 2 for that matter. The upper half is mounted on the wall, I said. We've got the mounted body, but not a whole second body. There's the body mounted on the wall, and the lower half beneath it, and a head outside. No second body, he assured me. I walked as fast as I could into the office, and he wasn't lying. The body of Anna's mom was missing. Nobody took the body of the old woman out of here. None of your officers? I demanded. I was getting pretty mad. No, we just got here, man. Well, bodies don't just get up and walk away. Then where's the head you found? I asked, but I assumed that it was the head of Anna's mom. What, you didn't see it? The officer asked. It's outside. Now, keep in mind, we did not touch it or move it or anything. We found it right where it is. I walked outside. There was a trail of brown, dried blood in the dirt path going to the gravel driveway. I followed it around the back of my car and along the driver's side. The head was sitting on my hood. But who the hell put it there? There wasn't just a decapitated head when we first got here. And especially not on top of my car. I walked around to the front of my car, my heartbeat increasing with every step. The head was facing that way. It was Anna's head. It was terrible. Every single one of her teeth, they were out of the gums and shoved into her cheeks and forehead and her eyes. They were missing as usual when it came to Stitch. I lost it right there. I got on my knees and I began to bawl. It was the first time that I had cried since I was a kid, with the never-ending disappointment from my parents as a kid and the constant beatings. I learned how to hold back my emotions at a young age, but it felt good. It really did, to finally let go of all of that. My eyes burned and my chest hurt. It was bittersweet, but it was worth it. It felt like a sack of bricks was lifted off my chest and shoulders, and I could think clearer, but the cost was far greater. Did you know her? The officer behind me asked. She was my partner. At the Seattle Police Department. I have known her most of my life, I said, trying to make out a clear sentence. Stitch is going to pay for this, I swore to myself. I got up off the ground and opened the driver's side door and popped my trunk. I grabbed a pair of disposable gloves from a box alongside with a pair for the other officers in the barn. I don't want to see that on my hood when I get back, and would you mind hosing down my car, please? I asked. Sure, I guess so, I said. I turned to walk back to the barn, and just as I did, I heard a loud neigh from one of the horses. I quickly walked around the house and hopped the fence going into the pasture. I jogged over the officer who was with the other horses. One of them was on the ground. Is it dead? I asked. Yeah, it passed. We're calling in some people to come take care of this one, though, if it's not too late. They should be here soon, he said. I walked back into the barn. Everybody else who I left in there were all standing in a circle, everybody but John, who was sitting in a corner sobbing. I walked to the back of the barn to see what everybody was looking at, and there was the rest of Anna's body. Her upper torso was in the middle, her legs and her right arm ripped off. Laying feet away, she still had rope around her wrists and ankles. Stitch killed her just like the people in his village killed him. I definitely think, no, I knew. I fucking knew. He was trying to send a message by killing her the way he did, and he sent it. I'm gonna go, John. Do you want to come with me or catch a ride with the FBI? I said. Don't leave me here with them, he said. And I nodded at him and hopped into my car as fast as I could. John got in a minute later after telling the FBI that we were leaving. Neither of us thought that they would be following us now. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. I yawned. I was getting really tired now that the gore wasn't fueling my adrenaline. We started driving out of Bellingham in silence once more. Both of us were exhausted. I put the radio on to try to keep us awake. After a while, the buildings of the city started to become sparse again. As we left the main part of town, the radio started to go to static. Every channel I tried was static, and I started getting nervous because of how the videos went to static in the second victim's death. I saw a white building start to appear in the distance ahead of us. As we pulled up, we saw that it was a Catholic parish, a giant church. Now, I usually laugh at those, but Catholic parishes aren't considered megachurches. Something in me clicked. With all the blood and the guts and the gore I'd been seeing, something in me needed to talk to God. Maybe, just maybe, he could provide some insight to the case. Maybe he could help me regain my sanity and get on track to solving this case. Maybe he could help me avenge my poor partner. Anna, I'm so sorry. I pulled over and parked the car. I'm gonna go in and talk to God for a little bit. Feel like I need some help, I said as I unbuckled. I'll stay here, not Christian, Jewish, he said. All right. I opened the door and got out of the car, back into the cold. I walked inside the church. It was enormous inside, had to be enough to hold 2,000 plus worshippers. I walked past a few stone pillars with holy water in them, and then I walked out of the lobby and into the worship area. There were candles lit all over the place. It shone on the stained glass and made Jesus' statue look pretty eerie. His crown of thorns created a shadow on his face, and the blood on his hands was as black as night in the lighting. I walked down the aisle between the pews. I walked down one and kneeled on the ground in the middle. I put my hands together and set my forehead on them. God? I started, but I didn't really know what to say. I need help. I'm scared. All the time. Paranoid. Then, all of a sudden, the candles went out. It was weird enough being alone in a church in the middle of the night, and especially with the size of it, but it just got scarier when the light was gone. I got up off my knees and looked around, spinning in circles. As I turned back around to look at the candles behind the podium, I heard loud bangs. All of the doors were being slammed shut. I turned back around to look at the doors I came in through. I slowly started walking towards them. I could barely see 2 feet in front of me. I stumbled a couple of times on some benches, startling myself each time that I made a thud. And as I reached the door on the wall next to it, I saw my shadow. There was a flickering light coming from behind me. I turned back around and saw the first and last row of candles were lit. That was when I started to hear a cracking sound. It wasn't a cracking sound like the fingers and necks and spines I'd been forced to listen to the past couple of months, no. It sounded like plastic or even porcelain cracking, and then I looked up at the statue of Jesus on the cross. He had a big, long crack going across his chest. It was crumbling right in the middle of his chest. I got closer, and as I got closer, it felt like the room was getting colder. I reached out to touch the statue, and as I did, the crumpling center of his chest fell out and knocked over a bunch of candles. I knew it was Stitch. The hole was right where his heart would be. The statue started bleeding. Out of the hole, his hands, his feet, his head, and his eyes. I was back on my knees, and I closed my eyes. I've never done it before, but I began to pray. I didn't know how, so I just pleaded for protection, and as I was pleading, I began to hear laughter. That awful laugh that had been haunting me since the beginning of this God-forsaken case. I needed to get out of there. I ran to the doors, but they were all locked. I started to panic. I started banging on the doors. I turned back around when I heard a loud thump. It was to the right of me. I saw a Bible go flying across the room and hit one of the confession booths. I took a step forward, and as I did, more Bibles began flying across the room, smacking into the confession booth. Was it a sign? I had no idea. I started walking towards the booths. I knew I still wouldn't be safe considering what had happened to Repetitive Routine, but I didn't care. I didn't want to see Stitch's face again. Anything but that fucking face. I opened the first booth and went in. I sat on the bench, buttoning up my jacket all the way and pulled the top over my mouth. And then it all started. The flame of a candle went shooting into the air in the next booth, hitting the top of the booth and going flat. As it died down, I could make out someone inside.
Hello, my son.
The familiar, dark voice said. Father? I asked, gulping.
You can call me that, if you like. I have to say, it's much better than what you have been calling me.
The voice said, beginning to chuckle. Why are you doing this? I asked. But I knew I wasn't going to get a straight answer.
Why?
Stitch asked.
Well, you went into the confession first. I am here to forgive you for your sins. Is that not what you came for, son?
You are not a religious man. You are a monster, a demon, I yelled. Stitch then began to laugh hysterically. I sat there looking at him through the mesh between the two sections. This whole time, he was looking at the confession booth door. He didn't look at me once. I am going to kill you for all that you have done. For honor, I yelled again. I looked back up to the other booth, and Stitch had his face pressed against the screen. He was smiling at me. I moved from left to right, and his face moved with me. I still don't know how he was able to follow me like that, with that skin stitched over his eye sockets, but he did. I closed my eyes and put my hands on my face. It was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. After a couple of minutes, I looked back up. Stitch was gone. I sighed and ran my fingers through my hair. I sat back on the bench and just stared off. I can't remember what I was thinking about, but it was deep, whatever it was. Then, all of a sudden, I heard a door open in the distance. Footsteps were getting closer and closer. They were fast-paced and small. I could tell that it was a girl. "Is there anybody in the church?" she said. "Yeah, I'm in the confessional," I said, still not fully thinking straight. "Are you okay? You sound distraught," she asked. "Yeah, I'm okay. Don't worry about it," I assured her. "Well, why don't you come out of there and get some fresh air?" she said. So I did. I came out of the booth. It was still dark. There were about 5 candles lit by the podium. I tried focusing my eyes to the darkness, and I began looking around. And then I finally saw the woman. She was a nun in the back of the church, on the opposite side of where I was. She was standing in the shadows. All I could see was the upper half of her body and her head. Something didn't seem right about her. She just stood there, not moving at all, just staring at me. "Would you like to talk about anything?" she asked. And as she talked, she looked almost puppet-like. Her mouth moved straight up and down, and her face never changed. It was expressionless. "Are you okay?" I asked. I wasn't sure about this lady. "Whatever do you mean?" she asked as she blinked. Again, she blinked and her face didn't change. It stayed stiff and plain. Her skin was extremely pale as the trimming on her habit. I felt sick. I decided that I'd just go home before anything else happened. I'm going to go now," I said while walking towards the door. And then the nun started moving. I could tell that she wasn't walking, though. It was like she was bouncing, kind of. She stayed in the shadows, though, only showing her upper half. I don't trust you," I said. The nun started laughing. She had a high-pitched girl laugh that echoed, and halfway through the laugh, it started getting deeper. And I knew it was Stitch now, but where was he?
"I see that I cannot fool you,"
his booming, dark voice echoed.
"Would you like to see my latest toy?"
As he said that, the nun started bouncing towards the candles. I walked backwards as she got closer to the podium. My back was almost against the door. She got in the light of the candle. I was horrified. Stitch was standing right behind her, and he also was wearing a habit. Not only was he wearing a habit, but he also had a crown of thorns on his head. It looked like his arm was around her.
"This is one of my favorites,"
he said while laughing. He started humming. I saw what was going on. He started spinning around with the nun. He wasn't holding on to her at all. He had his left arm in her back. A big bloody hole in her back. His elbow was bent as if his forearm and hand was in her head. He made her bounce like a child who would make a Barbie doll bounce when they would pretend the Barbie was walking. As she bounced around, walking around the stage, her arms flailed in all directions. Stitch repeatedly opened her mouth and closed it. I could hear her teeth slamming against each other, even in the back where I was. It made my mouth hurt just hearing it. He made her blink a couple of times, and then he picked her up with both hands and slammed her onto the ground.
"Well, she was fun, but I'm done with her now,"
he said.
"I need a new thing to play with."
He finished his sentence, and I started looking around for a way out. There had to be a way out. I looked towards the statue of Jesus at the front of the room. Something about the statue was different than minutes before. I could see something in the chest. I squinted my eyes and got a little bit closer. I saw hands coming out of the hole in his chest. They were facing opposite directions. I started to get closer, and with each step I could hear someone singing some sort of religious song, but it wasn't in English, so I had no idea what they were saying. I started going up the steps towards the statue. I froze in terror at what I saw next, though. The hands! They started pulling apart the chest of the statue, and a head popped out. It was repetitive routine. I recognized his hair and his face from my dream. He didn't say anything. He just crawled out of the statue and fell to the ground on what was left of his legs. He landed right on his femur, and the cracking and snapping sound made me want to rip my ears off. He started pointing behind me. I didn't want to turn my back on him, but I couldn't help it. I turned around and saw Stitch standing right in front of a big, stained glass window. He ripped off his habit and started to rub his chest. He rubbed from his chest, around the burned cross on his chest, up to his neck and onto his face. He started humming again, and as he hummed, the main door opened again. I turned around as fast as I could to run out. I took 2 steps, and then I heard bubbling. I looked up and saw the holy water was boiling. I didn't know what to do. I turned back around and saw Stitch running towards me, full speed and yelling like a madman. I blacked out. I don't remember anything after that. When I woke up, I was in FBI custody. I was lying on a bed in the infirmary of the prison downtown. I jerked up and rubbed my face to wake myself up. How long have I been out? I asked the woman on the other side of the room. Just a few hours. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Some FBI people would like to talk to you when you feel up to it, she said. I put my feet on the ground and stretched before standing up. Where do they want to see me? I asked. She pointed out the door. Someone's been waiting for you outside, she said. I walked out the door and into the familiar plain hallway. On a wooden bench on the wall, there was the man who interrogated me the first time. He gestured for me to follow when he stood up. We walked down the hall and into the same room we had been in before. I sat down at the table again and waited for something to happen. The man left the room and came back in with a folder. He sat down across from me. Okay. First things first. We know that you stole the journal in your file, but that's not the real issue here. You are being charged with vandalism, he said. What? I said loudly. I nearly burst from the chair I was sitting in. What do you think I vandalized? The answer was obvious, but I couldn't be sure. They were pinning all kinds of shit on me at this point. The church, the man said. I just shook my head at him. I didn't do anything. Watch the damn tapes. It's a mega church. They probably have cameras everywhere, I said. The man looked stunned. Apparently I was better at doing his job than he was. I mean, seriously, how hard is it to look at tapes before trying to convict someone of something? Fine, the man said. Then we'll call you back when we prove you did it. I thanked him and stood up, though I don't know why I thanked him. I walked out of the building, and the sun burned my eyes. It was sunny for once, though. Maybe that was a good sign. Maybe my visit to the church did some good. I found my car outside. They must have towed it here after they found me. I got into my car and drove back to my apartment. I didn't know what was going to happen from here. But the sun made me hopeful.